So, for my later lessons, like I was saying, I really started focusing on what the students were getting engaged in. I did one lesson with an experiential. It was on Middle Ages feudalism. So we had each person, they got into groups. Each person was a different rank of the feudal system. And according to your rank, you got however many Skittles. So you had kids that were getting so angry because they were peasants and they had to do work, and then they gave away all of their Skittles to the people who already had a lot of Skittles, and they were really angry about it. But they got really into it, and it ended up being one of the best. When I assessed them on it later in the form of a test, they all, pretty much across the board, got the feudalism pyramid down. And so I was trying to incorporate more experientials, some of the things that we learned from Dr. Wigington with putting different things on your back, and you have to figure out who you are. I did that for the Japanese feudal system as well. Like I was talking about earlier, I started incorporating a lot more group activities into my classes. They would occasionally, if they were bad, have to work by themselves because they really didn't like that, and it was kind of an incentive to participate in activities. But for the most part, they got to work in pairs or groups of 3. At first, I assigned their groups, and I told them that once they showed me that they could get their own work done in groups that I put them in, then they would get to start choosing their own groups, which they really appreciated, and it ended up working. At first, they told me they hated me every day because I wouldn't let them work with their friends. But eventually, they earned the right to pick their own groups, and they actually did work really well. It also was a really good lesson in sinking or swimming. You had a lot of kids that would goof around with each other, and then they wouldn't do well on their assignment. And they realized pretty quickly that if they wanted to do well, they would have to pick more responsibly. So it was a good exercise in responsibility for them as well. So usually these group activities really helped them learn. They would break into groups for a while, probably 15 to 20 minutes, and then we would come back together and go over what they got. I usually didn't say that in the beginning because I also found out that a lot of them would sit there and do nothing and then copy other people's answers once we were going over it. So sometimes we would come back together and as a class go over it. Sometimes I would just collect it and see how they did, and the next class period would be a review of whatever was necessary. And my last major change that I started incorporating was the use of Prezis. My classroom had very, very little technology, so that was hard to deal with. We had our projector hooked up to a PC, so I couldn't even bring in my own computer to hook up. But the first Prezi I did was for the Chinese culture section. And the kids were really excited at first. It was moving around. They hadn't seen a Prezi before. They got pretty into it. And then towards the end, I knew they were sort of dropping off, and I knew that they would because it was a almost solely lecture class that day, so I didn't want it to be too boring. So part of the culture section that we talked about was Chinese foot binding. So I put up a picture of it up on the Prezi. I didn't tell them it was coming. I clicked to it and everyone got grossed out. But was like, what is this? So we got to talk about Chinese foot binding, why it was important in Chinese society, what it meant, why it was influential. And I had them talking about it the week after, about how they were so grossed out by it and they couldn't believe what it was and why the Chinese society did that. So it really stuck with them. And they also really liked the zooming around with the Prezi. And then the second one that I did, I only got a chance to do 2, was a Japan one. And Prezi does not let you embed Prezis within it. I think that would be too Inception for it. So I just put up a screenshot of the first opening slide. But I tried to incorporate some images in every single Prezi slide, tried to make sure that there were things that they could link to not only auditorily but visually, and they were also writing things down as well. So we kind of had a trifecta of note-taking and activities. And then afterwards they did sort of an activity where they got to walk around, they got to talk to one another. And while some classes didn't do great with it, some didn't even get to it because they had too many questions. The classes that did, they had different feudal ranks taped onto their back. And once they figured out who they were and found the other people that were also in the same category, I made them tell me about themselves as if they were peasants or as if they were samurai. And this ended up tying in really well because they were like, well, what's the difference between a samurai and a ninja? So we had a discussion. And they also knew their feudal system in Japan. So it was really important to make these connections to things that they were interested in and in a way that they thought was really important. And that's really how I really evolved as a teacher. I made sure that I wasn't only doing what I thought was cool, because that clearly didn't always work. I tried to take into consideration what my students liked, what was working for them, what they were succeeding with, and I tried to make sure that I used that throughout my lessons, and I got feedback from them if they liked it, if they didn't like it, and I will continue to do that as I continue teaching, and I think that's a very valuable lesson that I learned. And sort of just to wrap it up, my world history class was an awesome experience. Bless you. I got to see a lot of behavior that I was not expecting, deal with a lot of kind of challenging issues that I also wasn't expecting. But the fact that I got through it, and I think successfully for the most part, and that they actually did, the last week I was there, they asked me not to leave and told me that they actually learned from me. And it was really funny because these are the same kids that not 2 months ago were telling me that they hated me and they tried to skip school so they didn't have to come to my class. All because I took away their slow motion Fridays or they watched movies. They got to the point where they didn't ask me every 10 minutes if we were going to watch a movie. They were actually kind of excited to do different things when I told them that we were going to try something new today. They would get excited. So I learned a lot from this semester, and I think it really helped me grow both in my confidence as well as the different tools that I had kind of in my instructional tool bag, to use a metaphor sort of. But yeah.